excited to share some information with you today. It's nice to see some faces from previous sessions, so thanks for joining us. Our session is titled Self-Determination for Youth and Young Adults with Autism. And
share your screen. Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jen Bumble. I'm an incoming assistant research professor at Kansas University Center on Developmental Disabilities. Started in education as a middle school special educator, went on to work with English language students, and then worked supporting middle and high school teachers across the state of Tennessee as an educational consultant, and just arrived here in Kansas in August. So it's been great to learn about the services and supports here and programs like K-CART and attend wonderful conferences like this. Ben, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ben Edwards. I also work at the KU CDD as a research aide, and I help organize the Kansas City League of Autistics, which is a local group that meets largely in the Kansas City area, but we're looking to people all throughout Kansas and Missouri, and trying and just anyone who feels like they would enjoy coming, autistic, non-autistic. I think we've had different people in the past few years, and so I guess that says it pretty much for me. Who else wants to?
Ryan, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Ryan Henley, and just like Ben, I'm also a research aide at the Kansas University Center on Developmental Disabilities. I'm also a research aide at the Research and Training Center on Independent Living. So I've been with KU for about 6.5 years now, and so I've just done work in that field during my time there. So for KCD, I work with the SDLMI and of course the SAGA project here.
And I'm Sheida Raley. I'm an assistant research professor at KU at the KU Center on Developmental Disabilities, and I'm also an assistant professor at the Department of Special Education. So we're going to share a little bit about the project that we're all a part of, the Self-Advocacy and Goal Attainment Project, the SAGA project, which you heard a little bit about during the lunch keynote. And then we're going to also share about a larger project that we've been engaging in called the PROPEL project. Both of them focus on how to promote self-determination for autistic adolescents and young adults. And we'll share a little bit about how we've engaged in inclusive research through our activities. So first, I'll turn it over to Ben to talk about our session objectives.
All right, so a lot of you probably dragged yourself out of bed, got yourself down here at a very early time, and I think I'll let you all know why it is worth your while. So first, we're going to define self-determination and describe how it is important to young adults and young people in general who are autistic. Well, anyone really. We're going to describe the evidence-based practice to promote self-determination, which is called the self-determined learning model of instruction. And we're also going to share some more current KU CDD projects that use SDLMI in school and in the community. And so, and it supports autistic youth, and they also focus on self-determination, which you'll find is a very big part of our work. But before we dive into any of those projects, I think it's very important to all know what self-determination is, just so we're on the same page. It basically means acting or causing things to happen as you set and move towards goals in your own life. Sounds like something we'd all very much use, I would say. Ryan, would you like to share some quotes by self-advocates on what self-determination means to them?
Yeah, so really these are just famous quotes just from just like what Ben said, certain advocates. And I think, to me, self-determination, I feel like one word that comes to mind is functionality, and just determination, of course, of just thinking of, what you want to do in life and just how to accomplish those goals, and, dreams, as it says on the bottom quote for yourself, that's just, those are just kind of my thoughts, that pop in my head. Self-determination means.
And we always like to start our presentations with really the voices of self-advocates, and I think these are all great quotes. My absolute favorite one is the last one in the last sentence. You have to go do something or you won't be nothing at all, which really shows the centrality and the importance of self-determination through the voices of self-advocates that we've had the privilege of working with. So we are part of a research center and we would love to share research with you for the rest of this session, but I don't think people would stay around. But we'll just share very quickly that really over 30 years of work and research has demonstrated that if we promote self-determination, then it's really a predictor of positive post-school outcomes. So specifically looking at in-school outcomes, we see greater academic and transition outcomes. So for students with disabilities, greater access and progress in general education curriculum, greater academic and transition goal attainment, and then looking at post-secondary outcomes, increased access, retention in post-secondary education, competitive and integrated employment, community participation, and the absolute point of everything that we do, which is enhanced quality of life. So we know all of this evidence that when we promote self-determination for youth and adolescents at this period of time, that we see these greater outcomes. So now that you're like fully bought in, now we could talk a little bit about self-determination and what that really looks like or what that means. So then we're all on the same page. So when we talk about self-determination, we really are talking about 3 self-determined actions. So the first action is really decide. So a person really setting goals for their future, really determining what they want based on their preferences, their interests, their values, their beliefs, really being that person that's initiating and taking steps towards the things that they want. The second self-determined action is act. And act is all about problem solving. So actually working towards your goals. When the barrier gets in your way, can a person identify how to get around it? What they can do to really navigate those barriers, which is really challenging, especially during the transition to adulthood. When a student is going from school-based services where things are sort of laid out, there's a process, there's an IEP team, there's people around to navigate, and then the adult service agency is a totally different ballgame. And then finally, believe. And I would argue that believe is one of the most important components and the one that takes the longest to change. So that's really about how a person feels about being empowered. Do they feel like if they set goals and they have the right supports to achieve their goals, can they make those things happen in their lives? And so sometimes, especially for people with disabilities and others from marginalized groups that experience repeated systemic barriers and repeated failures as they work towards their goals, building that belief component is really important because they need to feel like I can do these things if I have the right supports and if I set a goal and I work towards it. So these are just some very quick examples. We won't go through each of decide, act, and believe, but we just want to highlight some more accessible ways of thinking through what decide, act, and believe mean. So really decide, thinking about a person who's considering 2 different clubs and choosing between a robotics club or choosing between art club and really weighing which area is more interesting to me. So sort of those basic skills related to choice making, decision making, prioritizing, communicating. I mean, important, but sort of like that basic area. Act, like I mentioned, is that problem solving piece. So as like the most simple way, if you want to get somewhere, if you want to go see the sunrise or the sunset and there's something blocking your path, can you identify what to do? Move it out of the way, walk around it. And so you can sort of put those things together along with things like, if you want to apply for a job, how do you get that job? What are some barriers that are in the way? You got to figure out how to use an online application. You need to put a resume together. So going through that problem solving process and that solution generating process. And then finally, believe. So believe is more about if you have this idea, if you have this dream of what you want to do, could you believe that you have the capabilities with the right supports to make those things happen? So knowing that if you're in school in 9th grade and you know that you need supports and tutoring supports, then you can have those right supports, and that will lead you to what you really want, which is graduating and having that high school graduation that a lot of our transition age students are focused on. So believe might look like this, but it also takes a lot of time to really develop. These are also some of those skills that I mentioned. So some of those abilities and skills. So looking at this list, as you look down and you look through choice making, decision making, self-advocacy, self-awareness, by maybe like a thumbs up or like a middle, like how many of you believe that you would benefit from growing in one or more of these areas? Yes, see lots of hands up, lots of thumbs up, yes. And this really shows that self-determination is not disability specific, it's not transition specific, and it's not just at your transition to adulthood specific, it's for everybody at all walks of life. all of us can work on one or more of these areas and sometimes multiple areas. So kind of taking it out of the disability space, out of the transition space, and that we really need to focus on how do we support students to be self-determined at every step. Going from the transition from kindergarten to first grade, fifth grade to sixth grade, where it's just very different, and then middle school to high school. So then they're really building these skills over time. And it's not like, oh, you're 14 or 16, time to be self-determined, because that just doesn't make sense. We need to start working on these skills early and really build those opportunities and capacities to make self-determination a reality. So shifting now to talk about transition outcomes for autistic youth and adolescents, Jen is going to talk to us a little bit about the foundation of why we're doing this important work.
Okay. We have a team with us today. Wonderful. So I just want to share a little bit about why this self-determination support is so important. And as I'm sure a lot of you that spend a lot of time with young people with disabilities out in the field know, you know that their dreams and aspirations are not always aligning with their outcomes. So particularly when we look at areas like post-secondary education, there are a lot of disparities between autistic youth and their peers without autism. So particularly when we're looking at something like finishing or college completion, we know that when young people are going on to college, only 41% of autistic youth are graduating that college programming compared with their peers. So a lot of work to be done, preparing young people to not only advocate within college systems, but build the circles of support that they need and get the services that they need to really be successful, whether that's academically or socially on a college campus. Then looking to employment. Again, as a lot of you probably know, employment outcomes for young people with autism look a lot different from their peers, particularly when we're comparing young people in these different disability groups. Youth with autism really struggle. So 58% of autistic youth are going on to paid employment after high school. Now, what's really striking though is that 58% is not even continued employment. That's being employed even just one day within 3 years after graduation. And this is from a national sample of young people with disabilities. So again, a lot of work to be done to not only prepare young people as they're going out into competitive employment, to secure the services and supports that they need to be successful, to disclose their disability, to move successfully through that interview process. Self-determination is a critical piece of preparing young people for that. And then, you know, life isn't all work and academics, right? Life really is about relationships. It's about social capital. And we know that autistic young adults are really struggling with narrow social networks. They're living in isolation. And the partnerships that they do have, the relationships they do have, are typically with family members or paid support staff. So it's critically important to start to expand those social relationships. How can we find folks, friends, partners, acquaintances in the community that can really support success? Because we know that that social capital is so important. Like, think of all the people that might be in your own social network that supported you through college to get to that finish line, right? Or supported you to find a job or get supports on the job. So social capital is another critical piece, and being self-determined to go out and initiate those relationships, have that confidence to communicate with folks that you might not be familiar with, and navigate some of those social relationships that can be really challenging. Self-determination is really the foundation of that. Sheila's going to talk about the self-determined learning model of instruction, which is how we move self-determination forward in a lot of our focused interventions for autistic youth.
When we think about building self-determination, I think a lot of people agree self-determination is important. They're like, how do you really build it? You know, it's like this intrinsic characteristic, you know, it seems important, but that seems like a lot of skills to work on. You just work on one of them. What does it look like? So when we think about building self-determination, what it looks like in practice, we really think of this cyclical process, where the first step of that is first having opportunities to explicitly teach those abilities and skills associated with self-determination. So those critical skills like goal setting, decision-making. You can imagine what decision-making instruction looks like. Let's weigh the pros and cons of each of these decisions. Let's decide what's the priority. Some students just really pick that up. Students with and without disabilities. Some students with and without disabilities need more explicit instruction in those areas. How do you set goals? How do you set goals that are measurable, observable, specific? You know, instead of just saying like, just do better at school. How do you really kind of focus those goals and focus those efforts to support them in that goal setting? Then the critical part too that I think we miss a lot of time is providing opportunities and natural opportunities to work on those skills. So how to actually set goals and create an action plan and problem solve and go through that process. And then finally, and this is particularly important for students with disabilities, including autistic students, providing supports and accommodations as necessary. Whatever that might look like, visual supports, modeling, whatever those strategies are to really teach that this is how you kind of go through the process of self-advocating, self-managing, and working towards your goals. So to that end, we want to share a bit about the evidence-based practice that is used in our self-advocacy and goal attainment project, the SAGA project. So in the project, we use our evidence-based practice called the self-determined learning model of instruction, or the SDLMI, which I'll call it the SDLMI for the rest of this session. Otherwise, the whole session will be me saying the name SDLMI because it's too long. So the SDLMI is really different than other interventions in the sense that it's not a curriculum. I can't just hand you a book like, Richard, here's a book, read it to somebody, and now they're self-determined. Instead, the SDLMI really changes the way that implementers, which could be teachers, it could be community-based facilitators like us, it could be mental health counselors, the way that people are really structuring opportunities for people to set and work towards their goals. So it's not changing the person, the autistic person, or the person with disabilities, it's changing the environment to be more enabling of self-determination and provide opportunities and supports for self-determination. As you can see here, the SDLMI is 3 distinct phases. So in phase 1, the person is really working towards answering this overall question of what is my goal, which is a pretty big question. There's lots of things to consider, and so I'll kind of show you how we break down that phase. The second phase is about what is my plan. So really figuring out, this is my goal, what's my plan to achieve my goal, what are the barriers I'm going to encounter, what are solutions to remove those barriers. And then finally, phase 3, which is adjusting that goal or plan. So self-evaluation. I would argue that a lot of interventions that focus on self-determination probably do a goal setting piece and maybe an action planning piece, but not many of them have a self-evaluation component. And I would argue that's one of the most important parts. Not just did you set a goal and did you create a plan, but what did you learn from that whole process? Did you learn that was the right goal for you? Is that the right plan? What does that mean going forward? I will share the quickest example of the SDLMI, but just because it is my favorite example. So it's using the SDLMI with a general education teacher in a 9th grade inclusive math class. And so students could set a goal around anything that they wanted. So in phase 1, half of the class set a goal that they wanted to be an NFL player. And so this is a 9th grade class, majority of, actually, I think none of the students were on the football team or actively practicing football. And you know, there might have been some of those group dynamics too, where it's like my friend here wants to be an NFL player, so of course I'm gonna be an NFL player too. And you know, me and the gen ed teacher that I was working with, we didn't get into education or disability to like crush kids' dreams all the time, you know, like all the time. So they set that goal. It's fine. In phase 2, then they started to action plan. They researched what do NFL players do, which is eat, you know, I don't know, like 30,000 calories a day, like work out 15 hours a day. And I think one student had one really large meal. And then we got to phase 3, and then most of the students were like, you know, that really isn't for me. Instead, you know, I want to be a professional spectator. Love the Chiefs, and like that's good enough for me. Some students were like, maybe I want to look into like, what would it take to be a sportscaster? Does my high school have like a journalism club or a journalism class? Some students were like, you know, I'm not really interested in this idea. One student was like, I want to know what it would take to be an engineer. Like perfect class, we're in math class, talk to math teachers. So making those connections, and this happened over a matter of weeks. A lot of people ask us, what about students or young adults that want to set goals that are unrealistic? And I would flip the question and say, how many of us around this room have set goals that were unrealistic? I've set a ton of them, usually on January 1st. So the point of the SDLMI isn't to achieve every single goal. None of us achieve every single goal. It's more about setting goals, learning the process of creating a plan, and then learning from that. So then they can go through the SDLMI over and over again in their life and determine what are the goals that I want, what are the supports that I need, and how can I make those things happen. That's what being self-determined is about, not about achieving every single thing or feeling like, is this realistic or not? Who's to say? It's only for that person to determine what is realistic. So as I mentioned, in order to go through the 3 phases of the SDLMI, there are things that we call student questions. There's 4 student questions in each phase that really walk the person or the student through the phase to answer the overall question. So in phase 1, the overall question is, what is my goal? So the 4 student questions in phase 1 really guide the person or the student through that goal setting process. So the first question, what do I want to learn? You know, and that could be in an academic setting, what I want to learn in math class, what I want to learn in science, what I want to learn related to transition planning. I want to learn what it takes to apply for a job to be a phlebotomist. What do I know about it now? So what's that background knowledge? You know, I know that it's really hard to get a job as a vet. You have to go through school and there's only so many places. So engaging them and understanding that background knowledge. My favorite answer to that question is, I know nothing about it. So great, now we can work from there. Student question 3, what must change for me to learn what I don't know? So what do I need to do? What do I need to do to learn this? And then finally, student question 4, what can I do to make this happen? What is my goal? What is my specific, measurable, and observable goal? So trained SDLMI facilitators really walk students or young adults through each of these questions so they can go through the 3 phases of the SDLMI. They do that with support, but it's very important to make sure that that support is really student directed and person directed. If a student is like, this is my goal that I want to work on and I'm adamant about it, that's what they're doing. And the whole point of the SDLMI is that you go through it over and over again so they learn these skills and they develop these skills over time. So as I mentioned, I'd love to talk about research the whole time, but we'll just talk about one slide that really shows the evidence of the SDLMI. So over 25 empirical research studies have really demonstrated the efficacy of the SDLMI. It's been used with more than 2,000 people ages 5 through 50 with and without disabilities, right? Because self-determination is important for all. It's been used in diverse contexts, K through 12 settings, college and university. In our settings, it's really a community-based implementation. And during COVID, it's been virtual. And then it benefits students with diverse support needs. So we've had people that have used the SDLMI with intellectual disability, learning disabilities, autism, emotional, behavioral support needs, and multiple disabilities. Through all of this work, the key finding is that the SDLMI is an evidence-based approach to promoting self-determination. So there are other models out there, but I really identified the SDLMI as a flexible model that can be used in diverse settings. All right, so Jen's going to talk a little bit about our project, the Self-Advocacy Goal Attainment Project, the SAGA project.
Yeah, so the SAGA project, named by Ben and Brian and the team. I think it was a group effort. I think we initially called it Project SAGA, and Sheida was like, no, it's the SAGA project. This project is funded by the Autism Intervention Research Network on Physical Health. So Sheida and Ben, co-researchers on the project, put together an application to really bring this intervention, as Sheida said, into the community. So how can we take it out of school settings, you know, not quite as fun, and how can we take it out of clinical settings and really move it out into the community where people live to make it more relevant in different environments. So the goal of this project is really to see how the SDLMI can impact change in young adults with autism. So how does it help increase their self-determination skills? All those different abilities and skills under self-determination, we want to measure all those and see how we can change those, if we can get those to increase. Also executive processes. What does that look like at the start of the project? And then how do autistic youth really grow in those executive processes in their mental and physical health as they move through the project? And thinking into post-school outcomes. So some of the goals that young people come up with during this project, not all of them are health related, right? Not everybody wants to exercise or eat healthily, those New Year's resolutions Sheida mentioned. You know, some people want to talk to more customers at their job, or they want to research some college programs. And so keeping it open to all of those things that contribute to our health, not just physical health, right? But we know relationships make a difference. We know that employment makes a difference. We know that continuing education, all of those factors are components of what brings a full and meaningful life, right? Health is pretty comprehensive. So we're really identifying how the SDLMI can be used in these community settings to support all of these different components of being a, you know, a healthy, well-adjusted adult. So a couple of key information bits about the SAGA project. So the SAGA project has 10 youth who are receiving the intervention, and then there are 10 youth who are in what's called business as usual. And that's just so we can compare what really is the impact of this intervention when we're comparing it to young people in the same time point that haven't had that intervention. So initially we were going to meet in person, but you know, COVID changed things up quite a bit. So we actually meet with young people virtually every week on Monday nights in the evening, and we're amazed because everybody just keeps showing up because we're so fun, right, guys? They're going to share some things, some strategies in a little bit, but a lot of different things that we're focused on for the goals. So at the beginning of the project, we let people know, like, okay, here are the buckets. We call them goal buckets. Where are you going to set your goals? Is it going to be in employment? Is it going to be in physical and mental health, post-secondary education? Or maybe you want to focus on like study habits or self-management or tracking your goals, those executive processes. Now, what's really cool is we also have an autistic advisory board led by Ben. That's what probably, I'm sure, share a little bit about. They meet monthly. And the goal of that autistic advisory board is to really get information and feedback from folks with lived experience, right? If there's one thing we all know is that researchers don't know everything. Just don't tell them that. But these folks meet with Ben every month, and he leads meetings to talk about these are the challenges that we're facing with participants. You know, maybe we're not engaging everybody in the right ways. Do you have some ideas? He's sharing the materials and the PowerPoints that we're using during these sessions to make sure that they make sense, right? Somebody might say, well, I wouldn't respond well to a slide like that, or hey, I don't think that necessarily has all the inclusive language, but we need to think about all the different things that contribute to intersectionality. So there's been some really great discussions and feedback that have come from that advisory board that all helps to refine this SDLMI that's really focused on autism and community settings. Just to prove how fun we are, this is our crew. Almost everybody was there, and you can see we have a lot of fun.
Fingers too.
Yeah, I think Ben wanted to point out that he does have all of his fingers. But this is our group. We have a mix of folks that identify as male, female, non-binary. We have folks mostly living here in Kansas, but we also have someone in California. We have another person in Missouri. We have young people that some are still in high school, some are undergraduate students, and even some master's students here at KU. So you can imagine the work we have ahead of us when we prepare for a session, because you can't just hop on there with one lesson plan for everybody. So it really is a team effort to make sure that everybody's engaged. And just to show you a little bit, you probably can't see all of these. But just so you can see kind of where those goals are landing for participants, I'm going to read a couple of them. So under employment, so they do develop these measurable goals that they will go after during the SAGA project. And as Sheida said, near the end of the project in those last 4 sessions, we're really working on reflection, right? Did I attain my goal? Which again, not the point. We don't achieve every goal. The real purpose is, what did I learn? And if I want to go after this goal again, what am I going to have to change? And if I don't want to do that goal anymore, I want to move on to something else. How can I do that next time? So, for example, under employment, I will research 2 different types of jobs or careers each week by the end of the SAGA project. Now, for each job, I will write a profile, including the job title, 3 tasks that are included in the job, and 3 things I like and do not like about the job. Now, you might tell that we provided a little bit of support into making this really measurable, right? You're going to fill out this profile. We're going to add this number of likes and dislikes. We also worked with this participant to make sure that they had a profile that made sense to them, that they could print out because they didn't want to complete it online. So just adding a little bit of support into that goal of wanting to research careers to make sure that it's measurable. And then they can look back and say, did I do it? Yes or no? Under physical and mental health, I will work out on cardio equipment for 30 minutes, 1 time per week by the end of the SAGA project. Under post-secondary education, each week during the SAGA project, I will research one college music program and write down 3 pros and 3 cons about the program. So you can see folks here are really interested in researching things. They want to find out more, especially as they're approaching graduation. And if you think back to your own high school experience, there might not have been a lot of opportunities to do that. I didn't really have the best guidance counselor. And I might be a little bit old where you went into the office and it was just like a whole bunch of pamphlets on the bookshelf, like nobody really had websites, or maybe they did, but you didn't really use them. So it's really great to provide this space where folks can go out and learn more about careers and learn more about different college opportunities, things that they might not have the chance to do while they're in their K-12 school programming. We have 2 folks that are focused on executive processes. These are both our graduate students. They really want to focus in on those study skills, those self-management skills, how to focus and how to move forward with their academics. And then we also have some social goals as well, spending 10 minutes in the break room every day saying hi to my coworkers. How often do we bring young people into work environments? They work. And then they go and have lunch with, everybody else that might not even be their coworkers. They don't have those opportunities to build those relationships and inclusive spaces. So through these goals, we're also talking, so this is through Project Search. So we're also working with Project Search to make sure those inclusive opportunities exist to work on these goals. It really becomes a collaborative environment where we're working with not only the school system, but also the family member and the self-advocate as well. And now I'm going to get out of the way so these 2 gentlemen can talk with us about the engagement strategies that we use with our participants. So I will turn it over to you. And when you need me to click, just let me know.
All right, sure. So, okay, I think I'm ready for the next slide.
Okay.
So, Ryan, is this yours?
Oh,
Or I can't remember who's exactly this.
Yeah, you should have Brian.
Oh, okay, sure.
So yeah, you guys are probably wondering what does a SAGA session look like? And so here, these are our roles. First, as it shows here, facilitator, provide accommodations and supports, and then the instructor guide how you set the goals and work on problems and then reach your goals. And then for the advocates, they encourage you to know that you can succeed.
Yeah, and so this is a slide that we share with them, right? To let them know what our role is so they know what to expect during the session. Is there anything that you wanted to add, Ben, before I go on to the next slide?
I can't think of anything exactly at the moment.
So then basically what your role is. So as far as a self-directed learner, you are the director for reaching your goal, and then followed up with this, of course, the active learner, talk and work with the facilitator, and then the self-advocate, share your interests, and you share interests, preferences, beliefs, and the goals.
Yeah, so when we're talking with participants, we're also letting them know this isn't a one-way street, right? It's not just us giving and they're there to soak up all of our amazing knowledge. This is really reciprocal. We are learning from participants just like we're supporting participants in their goal achievement. So the real purpose here is to make sure that they know they also have a role here in the SAGA project. It's to really be active in this process, but also to self-advocate. If something isn't working for you or you need a support that we haven't thought of, or you need to meet at a separate time. We have a lot of young people that simply can't make it. They have busy lives. So we're identifying other times during the week we might have a one-off session. Or maybe they want to talk more about their goals beyond the session that we're having. They want a little bit more support. We meet with them again during the week. So making sure that they feel empowered to ask for what they need, not only in school, not only at work, but also within this project.
So yes, I think I'll go over a couple of the engagement strategies we do. We do videos, we do Padlet, which is kind of like a digital bulletin board. We have Google Docs where people can brainstorm, keep track of their goals, and we have small group discussions. People get into groups with like-minded individuals, discuss their goals, and they learn a lot more about themselves and others, and they can really build strong relationships. And in addition to all that, we have things like Mad Libs, we have scavenger hunts, we have bingo. Oh, and Wordle, that was the other one. I think I think Wordle's a pretty fun game, it's long, but it all comes down to it, yeah. So I think I'm ready for the next slide.
What do you think is the most effective strategy then? The Wordle, you think, or is there something else too?
I think Wordle's pretty good for engaging people. As for teaching people, I think these small group discussions really do it. I think people are able to, I mean, I guess it might not be what everyone really responds to the most, but I think people will definitely gain a little more perspective on their goals when they get into these discussions. And so basically our lesson format is we meet for 90 minutes on Zoom. We'll usually have like an icebreaker. I've come up with a couple of them. My favorites have been, you could live with any fictional character, who would it be and why? Barry Allen the Flash, because he could run errands for me at superhuman speed. What is your favorite sandwich? For me, that was the Waikiki chicken sandwich from Tanner's. Oh, we have another thing we have we check in to see how everyone is doing. It's how are you kind of scale where there are different pictures of humans, animals, beings with different facial expressions, body languages, behaviors, and they're numbered, but it's not all necessarily in order of the different states of being or how someone is feeling. There's just a picture pretty much for each. People just say the number of the picture that most describes and most corresponds to how they're feeling. So we've had how are you doing on a cat scale? How are you doing on a sheep scale? How are you doing on a Flota scale or a SpongeBob scale or a Homer Simpson scale that I recently picked out for one of our upcoming lessons? So yes, and then we usually go on to have a PowerPoint to disseminate the content of the lesson. After that, people break up into small groups. They discuss their goals, they get feedback and advice. And yeah, I think they learn to apply what they've learned in these groups. And I think that pretty much says it for our lesson format. I think I'll turn it over to Sheida now to talk about another project focused on young autistic adults called the PROPEL project.
Thanks, Ben.
Sure.
And just if you're wondering like where we are in the SAGA project, our participants are just after phase 2. So they're currently implementing their action plans, and then on Monday, we're gonna meet with them, and that'll be when we get into phase 3. So we're gonna start talking about what have you done, what actions have you taken, and really engaging in that self-evaluation. So we're sort of getting to the end of the SAGA project, which is kind of hard for all of us, I think, because we've really gotten close, but it's been a really nice way to really engage autistic adolescents and young adults in identifying what they want to do and building self-determination. So one other project that we wanted to highlight, because there's lots of people in the room and us that are all involved, is the PROPEL project. So the PROPEL project is slightly larger than the SAGA project. It's not 1 year, it's 5 years. It's funded by the Institute of Education Sciences by the U.S. Department of Education. And really the focus of the PROPEL project is to examine the individual and combined impact of 2 evidence-based interventions. You guessed it, but one of the interventions is the SDLMI, of course. The other intervention is peer supports. So really a systematic way to engage peers with and without disabilities in supporting autistic youth who are engaging in classroom activities. This work is a partnership between our center, the KU Center on Developmental Disabilities, KUCD, and the University of North Carolina. And we still have maintained our relationship after last week. So it's indicative that we can really work with people with, diverse strengths. So over 4 years, because we had 1 year, which was our planning year, we'll engage 36 schools across Kansas, Missouri, and North Carolina to either engage in one or both of the interventions. So we'll have schools that will be randomly assigned to just implement the SDLMI only, peer supports only, or the combined intervention of SDLMI plus peer supports. So we can really understand, we know that SDLMI works in those settings, we know peer supports works. Now, how about the combined intervention? So this past year has been our first year of implementing for the PROPEL project. Jesse Kivlin is in the audience. Jesse is a coach for some of our Kansas schools, so supporting them as they're implementing the SDLMI, peer supports, and the combined intervention. So over this year, we have had 11 high schools across both of our states, then 50 students with autism, 25 teachers, and that includes special and general education teachers, because peer supports happens in inclusive general education classes. And then we also have special education teachers who are delivering the SDLMI and supporting that integration of peer supports in those gen ed settings as well. And then, of course, in order to get them up to speed on both of the interventions, we provided 11 professional development sessions. So the PROPEL project is really a wonderful way for us to really understand how can we promote academic, social, and self-determination outcomes for autistic youth and adolescents in school-based settings, and really support their special and general education teachers in changing that environment to be more enabling for self-determination. So we're not trying to change the student, we're trying to support and build those opportunities and skills, but that really starts with really changing the practices for that teacher to make those opportunities happen.
We not only have a coach, we also have an observer from our team.
Oh, that's
too, out
right.
in all those classrooms.
That's right, yeah, Daniel Greenberg is a postdoctoral researcher at the KU Center on Developmental Disabilities, and he's been in every single one of our Kansas schools this year collecting data on fidelity to really understand, are these teachers really implementing the intervention as intended? And if not, what supports can Jesse provide as the coach to really support them in getting there? So it's not just training, but it's also then monitoring and then providing that coaching to make sure that they are really using the intervention as intended. This is a little bit more information. So over this year, which isn't over yet, they're still implementing SDLMI and peer supports. We've had over 200 SDLMI lessons that have happened across those 11 schools, 15 classrooms with peer supports, and then working with teachers and over 40 coaching sessions with them. Some of the goals that students set relate to academic learning. A lot of them relate to grades because that's what's on students' minds and that's what they want to be focusing on. Some of them also relate to social activities and social skills of being in those general education classrooms and wanting to build those relationships with peers with and without disabilities that they're learning with. Here are a couple quotes from some of our teachers and students, and we'd be very happy to continue to kind of share information and results of this project over years. So the idea is that each year we'll have a different cohort of schools, so then we can really understand differences between cohorts across the year. So they'll get 1 year of intervention, and then we'll follow along with each of those schools across the years, so we can really understand the impact of 1 year of intervention in SDLMI and peer supports. So we're just kind of getting to our time, but I did want to highlight a couple of resources that we'd like to share with you. We have the SDLMI Teacher's Guide, which is publicly available on our website. This really describes the 3 phases, provides more resources, some case studies of what this looks like for students without disabilities engaging in the SDLMI in whole class settings, for students with complex communication needs engaging in the SDLMI inclusive settings. And then these are a few articles that really describe using the SDLMI in a diverse settings. We'd be happy to share any of this information with you. You're very welcome to reach out to us. There's also a ton of information on our website too, just self-determination.org. So you can learn more about the SDLMI, access the SDLMI Teacher's Guide, and then I cannot figure it out, but you likely can figure out how to follow us on social media. Thank you for the opportunity to share about our projects, the SAGA project and the PROPEL project, and we'd be happy to take any questions in our last few minutes.
Questions to you gentlemen primarily. I have a 26-year-old, wants to go to college, refuses to get to advocate, and so just fails, drops out, can't. What would you say to him in order to encourage? Because for me, I'm the mom. I don't want to be the mom. I want to be the support. So anyway.
I would just say, keep trying, I think in our minds, we just want to say, oh, don't give up. You just gotta try your hardest and, maybe some assistance, or maybe there could be resources out there that could help with them. barriers, or that's what some like to go through.
I think it might be that maybe it takes time for some people to learn the lesson that they have to advocate for themselves, or that there's a reason they have to advocate for themselves, and this is the reason. I think some people learn that faster than others, really. I actually didn't even start using the OAS at my college until, well, I didn't start, but, well, I used the resources at my community college kind of irregularly, but no, I didn't really make the choice to use the resources at my four-year university until I was about 24, and well, almost that age. I mean, I completely still didn't quite understand the reason why someone like myself ought to use these services and something like that. It was going back, if I were to probably do a college again, I would probably use some of these services more. I mean, just knowing that I've made it through college with a relatively good GPA and I've been into graduate programs, I see, more of the importance of these things. But yeah, I mean, it took me some time, for one thing.
If you want to talk about your group in Kansas City in case anybody is.
Oh, yeah.
or interested?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned before, I help organize the Kansas City League of Autistics, which Spencer Hunley, who's here today, also helps lead with me, and we all help run this thing together. And it's, we've managed to slowly grow our bases. I mean, we've had kind of all things that were what KCLA was before, which is a former chapter of the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, which for various reasons I don't quite know the full story of, decided to pretty much just be a Washington DC based organization. And as I understand it, so many chapters like ours is still learning the ropes of doing, are struggling to just have their own 501c3 organization. And so we've kind of developed with our executive board a general format for our timeline of activities. We have like a general meeting on the second Sunday of the month, workshop on the fourth Sunday of the month. This workshop, we have been planning on doing it on anti-discrimination laws. And, hopefully this will be something where we can teach people just about the effects that they can have on the legislation by, things like what companies they choose to give their money to, because so many companies I just recently stopped giving my money to because I realized some things they support, some funds they donate to fund certain laws that I don't agree with. And, we're hoping that maybe everyone who comes to KCLA will feel a little more like they have some power in this world. So that's our kind of goal.
So I assume you have a website. That was my question.
We have a Facebook page.
Facebook page.
So and Spencer, feel free to add anything that I'm leaving out or just totally not getting right at all, because,
We'll put a sheet together, Ben, and so anybody interested in learning more about self-determination or the SDLMI or Ben's group as well, you can sign up and we'll just email you and send you out some more information.